Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to English Grade 11 video lecture series. I'm your instructor Zia Hamid. I hope that you're doing well and you're ready for the lecture. Now, students, we are going to cover our lecture 4C with the same learning outcome as we covered in the last two lectures, but this time we will cover verbs. So let's read the learning outcome. It says, demonstrate knowledge and application of parts of speech. And in parts of speech, we will cover verbs and some types of verbs. And you know that it can be utilized in your oral and written communication in varying degrees of complexity. So since we know that parts of speech are very complex, because when we are talking about the types, differentiating between these subgenres or subcategories of verb, noun, pronouns, and all of the remaining parts of speech, we cover different things. It is very much important that you understand the distinction between these categories and the subcategories of parts of speech so that you can use them very well and also use them in your oral and written communication. In the last lecture, we talked about pronouns, and in the lecture before, we covered nouns and some types. So I hope that you're following. Now it's time to understand the verbs. I hope, students, that you are very well aware of what a verb is. It is a word that shows action. But there are different verbs. Now let's see what verbs are we going to identify. So what are verbs? Do you know some types of verb? Now we know that there is our main verb. Then there are our helping verbs or auxiliaries. There are modal verbs. Verbs are categorized into regular and irregular verbs. There are transitive and intransitive verbs depending upon whether it has an object or not. There are some linking verbs as well. So let's go through each of these categories of verbs and see that how we can understand them. So students, this lecture needs your prior knowledge, your understanding, and full attention. We also have some resources like worksheet and skill sheet that helps you in doing the practice and the exercises that we have so that you can put your knowledge into practice and test it. Now, students, let's see what a verb is. If we have memorized, if we recall, a verb is a word that indicates a physical action like sit, breathe, run. All these require your physical activity, running, breathing, though it is automatic, you breathe, you don't even think about it. So, and sitting, playing, all these are your verbs. So these words show physical action. And not only physical, but mental as well. Mental actions that requires your mental capacity, your understanding, and also the abstract actions. For example, understand, believe, recognize. These are also actions, but they are expressing your mental actions. Or even a state of being, if something is in existence. And we know that be has different types like is, are, am. So be has so many other forms, but these are the basic forms. And they are also working as our helping verbs in every sentence. Now, what does the verb do? A verb tells or asserts what a person or thing does. For example, Salim builds a house. We have our subject, a proper noun, Salim. And this is our subject and this is our predicate. And in the predicate, we have our verb, main verb, build, to build something. And Build what? A house. This is our object. So, similarly, the clock strikes. Striking is also a verb. What is done to a person or a thing? For example, Salim is scolded. Being scolded is also a verb. The window is broken. Now, this is telling us that what is something done to a person or a thing. Now, let's talk about the state of being. For example, if we say the man is dead. Now, this word is showing us the existence, the being or the state of something. Wood is hard. Now, these are also coming in our verb categories. Now, let's understand some types of verbs. Students, what do you understand by the word action? When we are showing an action, all of those words that are showing this action, they are called action verbs. All right. Now let's see. Action verbs are also known as dynamic verbs. Why? Because they are changing. When we are doing an action, it is requiring some movement, not a static one, but a dynamic movement. So this is what we call action verbs or dynamic verbs. They express specific action and are used anytime you want to show an action. For example, I run faster than Danish. Run. Run is an action verb. He does it well. Doing something is an action verb. Now, can you name some action verbs? Play. I play cricket. Now, what kind of verb is I observed something? Observing is a mental kind of verb. It's a mental verb. So we are clear about the difference between action verbs and mental verbs. Action verbs are dynamic verbs and they require your physical activity, your exertion, etc. Now, let's talk about auxiliary verbs. Auxiliaries or auxiliary verbs are very common and they are also called helping verbs. Why? Because they are helping our main verbs. So if you see in these examples, they are also used together with the main verb to show the tense of the verb, negative formation and question formation. So all of these three are working with our main verbs and that's why we use auxiliaries or helping verbs or auxiliary verbs. For example, you may see some examples over here. The girls were talking. Talk is our verb. It is our main verb. But something is telling us the kind of thing that is happening. The girls were talking. This is our helping verb or auxiliaries. And we know that verbs have tenses. So this is in the past tense. The girls were talking. Past continuous. I have learned my lesson. And have is helping our main verb learn. And this is also in the past form. He can play football. Here, this is our modal verb which is telling something about the verb play. He can play, he cannot play. So we can write positive, negative or interrogative form of the verb and tell the possibility or the probability as well. So he can play football. Can is your auxiliary verb. And what kind of auxiliary verb is it? A modal verb. This is a modal verb which is also working as an auxiliary verb. Play is our main verb here. So all the verbs that are helping our main verbs, was, were, is, can, could, have, has, they are all your auxiliary verbs. The words talking, learn, and play are the main verbs, whereas were, have, and can are helping verbs or auxiliary verbs. So students, it is better that you make a list of all the main verbs that are used, action or mental verbs, and you can also memorize or make a list by your memory of all the helping verbs that you know, whether they are used for singular, plural, or for present, past, or future. Now, this was like a revision because we are aware of most of these main verbs and helping verbs. Now, verbs are also categorized in different types. Some verbs are transitive, whereas other verbs are intransitive. Now, what is a transitive verb? Let's see. A transitive verb is a verb that denotes an action which passes over from the doer or subject to an object. It means we need an object on which the action is being performed by the doer or the subject. So such kind of verb that requires an object is called transitive verb. For example, Ahmed eats an apple in the morning. Ahmed is our subject. Eat is our verb. And eats what? On which the action is being performed? It is performed on the apple. And we also have some further detail, a complement. So Ahmed eats an apple. We have our object. The action eats cannot take place without an apple. Ahmed eats. Eats what? We need some object. The verb eats therefore is a transitive verb. So all the verbs like eats and others, they require an object. And such verbs that are requiring an object, dear students, they are transitive verbs. Now, on the contrary, we have intransitive verbs. An intransitive verb is a verb that denotes an action which does not pass over to an object or which expresses a state or being. For example, the sun rises in the east. The action denoted by rises stops when it's with its subject. It is called an intransitive verb. We do not need any kind of object here, and this is just showing a truth. This is showing a state or being. The sun rises in the east. Rises is our verb, but does not require any kind of object. So such verbs, such words are called intransitive. So transitive requires an object, whereas intransitive verb does not require an object. Now there is the list of transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. Students, you can look them up online. You can look them up in your grammar books, in the book, and you can find that all these verbs are categorized and they tell you whether you use an object or not. Now, let's move further. We have stative verbs. Now, what does the word stative means? It is expressing a state rather than an action. This is opposite to action verbs, where you require an action, where you do physical action to show the verb. Now, stative verbs can be recognized because they express a state rather than an action. They typically relate to thoughts, emotions, relationships, senses, states of being, and measurements. For example, the doctor disagrees with your analysis. Now, disagreement, it's a state of mental capacity of understanding. Agreeing, disagreeing, they are stative verbs. They are happening in your mind and you can express them. They are your emotions, feelings, your opinions, and measurements. Now, students, let's talk about modal verbs. Now, modal verbs, modal with an A, these verbs are auxiliary verbs As we talked about it in the previous one of the slides, can. We said can was actually a modal verb. It shows possibility. It shows abilities, possibilities, permissions, and obligations. So if you want to show possibility, if something can be done or not, we can use modal verbs. We can also use them to show abilities, to ask for permissions, and showing obligations. And all these verbs are modal verbs. Can, could, shall, should, must, will, would, may, might, need to, ought to, must, and may, and some others. They are modal verbs. Can is showing a possibility. Could is showing possibility in the past. Shall, should is showing obligation, etc. Will is for future. Now, all these modal verbs have different functions, so we have to use them accordingly. Let's look at these examples. He can shoot a 3-point shot easily. Now, can, it means that he is able to do it. It is possibility. You must not delay. It is obligatory that you must not delay and you have to do it on time. Sana would not recommend the Nihari. Would is also a modal verb. We need to leave now if we want to catch the train. Now, need to, it is showing necessity. So, necessity is also used in modal verbs. Judging by the clouds, it might rain today. Now, might is actually probability. It means that it may happen and it may not happen. Will you turn that music down? I should go home. Tanya may be late. Well, shall we go? So all these are working and having functions. I should go home. This is showing an obligation, a very important thing. You should take advice from the elders. So this is obligatory. And now, if you say, can I use the bathroom? This is also, the can over here is showing a modal verb. It is asking for permission. Can means that yes, you can. But the right way is to say, may I use the washroom? May I go to drink water? So may means that you are asking permission. Can means that you are able to do it. For example, I cannot play today. It means that you have not the ability to play. So you can say, you can add not with can and it becomes opposite of can. Cannot is the opposite of can. So in negation or in positive or even in interrogatives, we can use our modal verbs. Next, we have phrasal verbs. It means we are mixing phrases with verbs. So verbs that are having phrase, a group of words, they are considered phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are not single words. Instead, they are combination of words that are used together to take on a different meaning to that of the original verb. For example, he brought up the same points again and again. So brought up, combination of two words. This is a phrasal verb. Bring is a simple verb, but bringing up or brought up is a phrasal verb. It has its own meaning. Sami handed in the wallet to the police. Handing something in, I make up stories all the time. So making up, so these are the words with some verbs with additional words to show you a phrasal verb. And they are not in singular form or they are not single, but they are having group of words. Now let's talk about regular verbs. Regular verbs are verbs that form the past tense by adding the letter D or ED at the end. For example, if there is a verb that we need to convert in the past form in the second or third form, all we can do is add ed, d or ed to make them. But if the verbs are not made with d or ed, they are called irregular. So regular verbs can be made with addition of d or ed accordingly. And the rest of the verbs are your irregular verbs. Let's see. We have a list of regular verbs here, the simple past form and the past participle form. Let's take the word agree. Can we convert it into the simple past form? Yes, we can add D. It becomes agreed, and this is a regular verb. Delivered will become delivered with ed. Fix, fixed. Injure, injured. Laugh, laughed. And past participles are also the same. So all these verbs and these kind of verbs are called regular verbs because we are just adding d or ed and we are converting them in past participle or the second form of the verb that we use in the past. All right. Now, then what are irregular verbs? Verbs that are not regular, that are not made with d or ed, they are called irregular verbs. It is very easy to remember, dear students. So, irregular verbs are those that don't take on the regular spelling patterns of past simple and past participle verbs. Let's look at this example. Be. In the past, you can use was or were, and in past participle, we use been to show the past participle of the verb. Fall, fell, fallen. Know, knew, known. Hide, hid, and hidden. All of these verbs are irregular because their forms of past and past participle are not regular. We need to alter the spellings in order to make these forms. So, now students, what are linking verbs? Does it ring a bell? What do you understand by the word link? Joining. Yes. A linking verb, also called a copular verb, connects the subject of a sentence with a subject complement. For example, the subject complement can be a noun or adjective that describes it. Common linking verbs include the verbs be, seem, become, and feel. Now, students, a complement is a word or group of words that are actually completing our sentence. And when we are giving complement, completing any sentence where the information is given about the subject, then we call them subject complement. And we link our subject with subject complement using these following linking verbs. Let's see. Number one, Farah is proud. The pillow feels soft. Now we know that be have a form is and feel is used here. So Farah is. It means that this sentence is incomplete. We need a complement. Proud. This is a subject complement because it is giving information about our subject. So the word is over here is linking our subject with the subject complement. Here the pillow is the subject and soft is our complement, which is an adjective. And the word feel is linking our subject with our complement, which is an adjective over here, and the word that is linking it is feels. So such words that are linking our subject with the subject complement, they are called linking verbs. Let's talk about subject verb agreement. Students, we have learned in the previous classes that if we have a singular subject, then we use singular verb. If we have plural, then we use plural verb. This is what we mean by subject-verb agreement. It means that your subject and your verb should agree accordingly. Verb must agree with its subject in number and person. The verb must be of the same number and person as its subject. If the subject is of the singular number, first person, the verb must be of the singular number or first person. If we do this, then we can say that our subject and verb are in agreement with each other. For example, we have an example, I am here. I is our subject. It is in the first person and it is singular. So can we use are? If I say I are here, is it correct? No. Why? Because are is used for plurals. But we have a singular subject in the first person. So it means that we don't have a subject-verb agreement in this sentence. Hence, I am here. I was there. I play cricket. I have a bat. So, our subject, our verb, they should be in agreement with one another. I were there. Not correct. Because we need a singular verb, a helping verb with it. Hence, this is correct. Now, let's look at some more examples. What if we have subject in the plural form? Then we are using the plural helping verbs. They are here. They were there. They have bats. They play cricket, not plays. That would be incorrect. They is here. Is it correct? No. They are, because we are using a plural number. We have more than one people in all these sentences. So that's why we are using the verbs that are according to the number of the subject. And this is what we call subject-verb agreement. Now, transitive and intransitive verbs. Transitive and intransitive forms of verbs are used to denote how a verb acts when used with a direct object and an indirect object. For example, Rashid gave a box of chocolates to his brother. Now, Rashid is our subject. This is our verb. A box of chocolate. What is a box of chocolate? A direct object. The verb is acting on the direct object to his brother. So, this is the brother is our indirect object. Why? Because it is being conveyed indirectly. Rashid gave a box of chocolates. Direct object to his brothers. Indirect object. It means that this is an object, but it is an indirect object. It is receiving the action of the verb indirectly through the direct object. So that's why we call them indirect object. Maria passed the water bottle to Kiran, who was sitting in the first row. Can you identify the direct and indirect object? Indirect object is Kiran or Kaman. Direct object is the water bottle. Now, Maria passed. Passed is our verb. The water bottle. Past is directly being applied to water bottle, and whom did it pass to? Kiran, and that is our indirect object. The little girl ran around the park for 2 hours. Now, can you tell me that if this sentence has an object, and it is a direct one or indirect. So do this by yourself. Now students, this is your classroom activity where you have to actually solve the MCQs. Read the following sentences and select the correct form of the verbs given in brackets. Rida a mile every day. Is it run, runs, or ran, or running? Yes. Runs. Why runs? Because we are talking about one person, and that's why our verb should be also should be agreeing with the number of the subject. The dogs all night. Barking is barked, barks, or bark. We are talking about the subject that are plural in number. So we will say bark, not barks, because we are having more than one subject. Now students, the rest of the MCQs are left for you. Now you have to solve them in order to check your understanding. Now you can pause the video and solve these MCQs that you see on the screen. All right. Here's another one. Now, students, so far we have talked about verbs. What are verbs? They are divided into action verbs and stative verbs. They are regular and irregular. They are having transitive and intransitive verbs and modal verbs, dative verbs, etc. So all of these verbs are very much important to understand. This worksheet allows you to practice your understanding of the different forms of verbs. And these resources are added. You will get a worksheet, a skill sheet according to the main lesson, and a question bank of all the tenses mixed so that you can solve them easily. This is all about today's lecture, dear students. Now, all you have to do is practice your understanding of the verbs, understand the modal verbs and all the different kinds of verbs that we have learned so far, dative verbs, linking verbs, etc. Now, it's up to you that how much you practice them. We have cleared each and every type with examples and with activities. I'll see you in the next video lesson. I hope that you will practice your understanding of the lesson with the resources. Take care of yourselves and Allah Hafiz.